It's the 9th of September 2023 and it'll soon be the 10th of September. This is Heritage Griffith's valuation. And we're just what I want to do is to look at who lived where. Now, there's the tithes books. This was a tax on all landowners, irrespective of their religion, to give a tithe or a fee, an annual subscription to the Protestant churches, the established church. Some say it was as high as 10%. It caused unbelievable troubles. I'm not going to go into it now. Maybe again we might. Now, the other one then, the other good one, the other good record is Griffith's Poor Law valuation. Griffith went about the country and he accurately mapped the country. He'd done a really good job. He used triangulation, and the maps are still the same as they are today, except that there's hedges and that taken out. Sorry, my nose is itchy. Now, so Griffith's Law is good, and you can go into it, ask about Ireland, go into Griffith's Poor Law valuation and search it. Now, I very often give out about the Irish government and other governments for things to do, but when it comes to our heritage and recording and putting it online, no better people. They do a fantastic job. I have to hand it to them. Great. They have really put it on the computer where everyone can see it, and it's well done. And I'd say the reason is that the politicians have very little to do with it. I mean, you can't go very far wrong in doing this. So there's a number of records. There's the tithes of 1835 or 36. There's Griffith's Poor Law valuation 1847 to 1855. Sorry, 1847 to 1865. Most of Griffith's is between 1851 and 1854. Most of it that I come across. Then you have the census of 1901 and the census of 1911. Now, let it be known that when it comes to Griffith's Law, it's only the land that's owner and occupier that's recorded, whereas the census of 1911 and 1901, or vice versa, if you go in datal order, 1901 to 1911, is a record of who stayed in the house on a particular night. And that is how censuses are still taken in Ireland and England today. That's how it's still done. And they're a snapshot of who was in that house at that time. They might only be renting the house, it didn't matter. There might only be a lodger. Now, with Griffith's Law, it's whoever had the land. And don't forget, all of the country was owned by landlords. Once Ireland lost the 1798 rebellion, it ended any hope of Irish owning land as such. The king gave out the land to his friends in England, usually ex-military officers. Okay, some Irish may have got estates as well. We'll not go into that. Most of it is English people came over here, took the whole land, and they couldn't work it all themselves, so they leased it out to people, and some of the people living there ended up, when they were in their own farm, they now were tenants. That's the effect of being ruled from somebody who doesn't have your interest at heart, whether it's a foreigner or somebody else. I always like to have control of what I own and what I do, and keep other people out and only get into debt as least as is possible. And I have the same view on migration and all of that. It's all about control. Now, we're going to specialise now here tonight on Griffith's Poor Law valuation, and you can go into it. There it's there. As I say, I don't often praise government, but I couldn't improve on anything they've done in the area of this heritage. Fair play to anyone that's working in it, and staff and everything else. Now, so you can search a town land, but Griffith did not record landowners and occupiers by the town land. Griffith had them by the barony, the county, the parish, and the union. The union was the Poor Law Union. That's what the workhouse was. Now, all of Griffith's Law was originally intended to put a valuation on land to keep the workhouses. And then it developed into the valuation for the county councils, even in my time. Now, In the late 1880s, there was a lot of agitation, and the British government was forced to buy out landlords. In other words, the tenant in a property, in a farm, could buy out, could apply, and the government would give money to the landlord, and he'd become a freeholder. Then the British government used to collect rent off the landowner. In other words, they bought out the landlord. That stopped the evictions. Then the government expected the owner to pay rent. And they did by and large. And that rent was a little red docket receipt in 2 moieties. They called it moieties, two moieties per year. In 1922, one of the things being debated by Collins and the other Irish delegation for independence was that they'd keep paying it. The British still wanted their money, and that was agreed. In 1932 or 3, Eamon de Valera was the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister, and he didn't want to be sending this cash across to England. And he stopped it. And it caused an economic war where you couldn't get your pigs. You bring 5 pigs to the fair, you'd end up with 10 coming home. And that has happened. Terrible sanctions were imposed on Ireland by Britain because they wouldn't keep paying the rent. They bought out the landlords with cash from Britain, give them a Klondike, and they expected the Irish landowners to keep paying the moiety forever. I think it was forever. Maybe it had a limit. I don't know, but you're talking about 100 years if it had a limit. So the thing about it is, anyway, that Hitler went to march up and down and went to throw a few shapes and frightened the daylights out of the British. And De Valera sent an envoy over to London, and he told him as well, try and get back the ports. Britain had Killala, Cork, Cove, and Dunleary, which was Kingstown at that time. And he went over, and he managed to end the sanctions on Irish goods, which meant that the Irish government collected the rent. The argument was that the government should collect the rent. They weren't saying they shouldn't collect the rent. The government should collect the rent. But God didn't agree to it. And then he remembered what Dev said to him, get back the ports. And he said to him, by the way, we have a wee problem there. You have 3 ports. In what right have you keeping those ports? These are for military purposes. And he relented. And they got the ports back about 1938 and got an end to the economic war. And the next thing, the war broke out, and the British thought the Irish government would give them troops to fight. But De Valera decided it'd be neutral. Now, they weren't strictly neutral in that Britain did all right. There was good relations, but still, there was a lot of people went over to fight, mainly from the former Unionist population. There was a few Irish, but not many. Britain had to fight the war on its own, and Britain whinged, and Churchill whinged, and said, we are on our own here with no help. And De Valera said, well, Ireland's on its own for 800 years, and we got no help either. In any event, it's only in the last 30 years that the Irish government stopped collecting the rent. It got, with inflation, it was whittled away that it wasn't worth collecting. And I paid it easily into the 70s and the 80s and maybe into the 90s. I can't remember. I know on one wee bit of land I had, it was £1.75. So that'd be about €2 today. Wasn't worth collecting. It's now gone. I think they did away with it. I don't know. Point is now, folks, we're going to have a look at Griffith's Poor Law valuation, and in future now I won't be going over this. I'll refer to this video. I just want to explain. Griffith measured the country, mapped it, and put down the occupier. Now in Griffiths you have the landlord, who is the landlord. You have kind of an agent of the landlord, or you can have somebody who sublet it from the landlord. That'll usually state in fee, in FEE. And then you have the occupier, who is the tenant. Up to about 1880, the tenant could be kicked out if the landlord didn't like him. After that, there was evictions down here in Marracloon that cut the rafters off the houses. There was evictions over in Bellevere. There was evictions all over. Not so many, depending on the magnanimity, is that the word? How magnanimous the landlord was. In Kingscourt there was Pratt. He wasn't too bad. In Carrickmacross there was Shirley, and they were rascals and merciless. And there was war over them in Marracloon. But this was the luck of the draw. So now, enough of the politics. What I want to do now is try and give you a few places who own them at a particular time. And I don't want to mention specific people's property unless I have their request or consent. You go into it, you can put in the town land, even though the town land was not in Griffith's valuation, it was only in the subhead. But you can search it with the county of the town land. And I'm picking one place tonight on 10 minutes, and that's Navan Racecourse, a very common place that everyone will know. What was the situation with Navan Racecourse way back at that time? And I've dug it up here, and it can be hard work getting into Griffiths. Well, Navan Racecourse is in the townland of Proudstown, and it's in the parish of Dunmore. Or is it Dunamore? What did I just see now a minute? Dunamore. Yeah, it's the parish of Dunamore. Now, here's the kind of a map you get, which is excellent. Original map. And we now see the race. I'm looking at the race course here. I know exactly where it is. All you need to go into is Aircode or go into Google Docs and you'll get the very same place. Simple for me doing it. And I see there's a house or two on it. And there's the land of the race course. And it's number 5C in the parish, in the townland of Proudstown. And we'll see now who owned what, who was there. And the first thing to stand out is what you have is the townlands and occupiers. Townlands and occupiers. You have the immediate leaseer, that'd be the landlord. And you can sometimes get in fee where he had it. That's fee simple, where he was the owner. And then you have whether it was a land or house or whatever. But the first thing to jump out is plots 1, plots 2, plots 3, plots 4, and plots 5. And James Aylmer, Aylmer, obviously English background, was the landlord. And there's amounts of land here like 131 acres, 158 acres, 26 acres, 10 acres, 57 acres. Now there's a Thomas Aylmer also had he must have been a brother. They had a lump of it as well. So it looked like the earlier landlord had these two sons and they had inherited. Now, so there's also trustees Richard or Fitzherbert. Again, big English fellas come over and took the land. So that's the situation. So now, the land at Prouds, you see, sometimes the landlords kept the actual land themselves and farmed it. And then in other cases, they let it out to tenants. So all around there is plot 1. James Aylmer was both the landlord and the occupier. There was a Christopher Mulady, same with James Aylmer, the landlord. There was Edmund Flood, James Aylmer, the landlord. There was Catherine Gerard with Edmund Flood was the landlord. You see, he had a sublet from Aylmer. There was Patrick Flood. James Aylmer was again the landlord. Patrick Flood again, trustees of Richard or Fitzherbert. And then there was a Bernard Smith who had a sublet from Patrick Flood. There was James Aylmer himself. He had 158 acres there. And he had down immediate lease here was the trustees of Richard or Fitzherbert. So somewhere or other they were interconnected. Excuse me. Now, there was a Patrick Coogan and there was Thomas Aylmer was there. Now, if we look at the map, we can see that the racecourse itself was plot 5C, and there was no racecourse there at that time. But plot 5C and 6 were all the same crowd. It was all part of a landlord's estate, and because it was good land up in Navan, there wasn't that many tenants as such. So we'll go back now and see the main one here. I can see it here is 5C, and 5C was James Aylmer himself, and he had it in trustees. The trustees of Richard or Fitzherbert had a say there as well. So they were some kind of trustees. It was probably one of these detailed estates, and they were maybe certainly the guarantors or something, or the trustees. Anyway, just to explain, trustees Richard R. Fitzherbert are the immediate lessors, Lessors, and the townland and occupiers were James Aylmer. So that's who owned Navan Racecourse. He both owned it and he was the tenant, James Aylmer. Anyone wants to check any more about him, fair enough. He had a house there, there's a little house there, because it says here there's a house. Actually, the house is plot 5C, and I can actually see there's a house there. I'm not exactly sure where it was. That is, yeah, I see it here. Here, a house on it, and it's there on it. You know, it's a bit hard to make it out, because what they did was they often put the house a different number. The same fella could own 3 plots of land and they could have a different number. But they divided up, they did it very well. They divided the town land in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Usually 12 is the max. Usually 9 would be about average. And then where there was little bit sublet or somebody had a wee house, they put ABC. So there could be 4 ABC. So the owner of Navan Racecourse was James Aylmer in that time, and it was not a racecourse. The racecourse developed, and I suppose one of the good things about the landlord system, if there could be anything, is that they often had big tracts of land that could be used for certain utilities, like a racecourse, a good little racecourse there today at the moment. And then you had like forest parks. You had Dunnery Forest Park, which belonged to landlords and was sort of preserved, and it's now a major attraction. And you had the same in Cavan. You had Lord Rossmore's in Monaghan and all of that. Now, folks, that's long enough. I'm sorry for being so late. Now, I will be in future. I'll just tell the facts. I won't go back over now who lived where and who was what, and I won't be naming anyone. If anyone wants to put in a place, give the air code. We can give it a bit of a look and see, can I find out. But you can do it yourself too. But it's difficult enough now. It's difficult enough. So when I check this old house here, I can find my ancestors here, as I was all told, 100%. I can get it back to her here in 1851 or 52. Another record too is parish records. There's some parish records which are very good as well, and they're maybe going online a little bit as well. They're very important because they can show marriages and deaths, births and baptisms and all of that. Now, the forecourts was bombed during the Troubles, and a lot of the census was lost. But they found bits of it partly burnt and things, and they're working on that again, doing a very good job. But we'll not go there. That's what I'm telling you. Hopefully we'll pick a few other places just to see who actually was there. It's very interesting. Around my country here, they're all nearly dead and gone. I think we're probably the last. We're the last of my mother's surname going back that far. Most are not going back anywhere like that. Most are not going back anywhere like that. But anyway, it's amazing we still hold on. Folks, enough of yapping. Sorry for being so late. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If you want anything, put it underneath and sure we'll give it an old go. I can't promise you, but I'll try and see who. All you're going to find out is who was the landlord and who was the occupier. Okay, good luck. We'll see you back for something else. Time to turn in our next day. Thank you.